Hey there, Anime Reborn fans! Ready to spend those hard-earned gems but not sure where to start? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Today, we're diving headfirst into the ultimate Anime Reborn units tier list. That's right, we've analyzed every single unit in the game, ranking them from absolute game changers to, well, the ones you'd probably want to avoid. Whether you're grinding through story mode or flexing your skills in PvP, this guide will help you pick the units worth investing your gems in. So, grab your snacks, sit back, and let's break it all down together. From OP towers that can solo entire waves to units that might need a bit more love from the devs, we're leaving no stone unturned. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where to aim your summons and which banners to steer clear of. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in Anime Reborn. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ichigo, Luffy PTS, Naruto, Mr. Set, Sakura Usagi PTS, Susake, Kurlin, Hitona, Zero PTS, Yamcho, and Tintin. Alright, let's talk about some of the units in Anime Reborn that may not exactly be your go-to choices, but still have a place in the game. The C-tier units. These aren't the most powerful, but hey, sometimes you gotta make do with what you have. And trust me, I know the struggle of not having the best units when you're starting out. So let's dive in and see what makes these C-tier units both a blessing and a bit of a curse. First up, we have Ichigo. Now, Ichigo might surprise you. He's a hybrid unit with decent range, great DPS, and even the ability to target air units. As far as starting units go, he's probably the best hybrid you can get when you're fresh into the game. While not the most impressive long-term, he'll definitely get you through some early maps, so don't be too quick to dismiss him. Then we have Luffy PTS, who brings a solid cone AoE attack to the table. He's one of those units that you get right when you log in, and honestly, he's arguably the best default unit you can pick. His AoE ability makes him great for dealing with large groups of enemies, and while he won't break any records, he'll definitely help you survive the early game. He's the kind of unit you'll rely on until you can grab something better. But not all C-tier units are created equal. Take Naruto, for example. He gets an increase in damage for every other Naruto in range. Pretty cool, right? As far as rare units go, Naruto actually holds his own in the early game. If you've got a few of these guys stacked up, you might be surprised by how much damage they can dish out. Still, he's not going to carry you to the end game, but hey, every bit helps when you're just starting out. Now, let's talk about Mr. Set. This guy, not so great. He's got a cone AoE attack, but it only targets ground units, and honestly, that's a pretty major downside. There are just better options for handling crowds or strong enemies. I wouldn't recommend putting too many resources into him unless you really have no other choice. Definitely not a unit you want to rely on for the long haul. Susake is another unit that's just kind of meh. His DPS is decent for a rare unit, but it's still not enough to make him a standout. He falls into that category of being just okay enough to use, but never really exciting. If you've got better options available, you'll want to pass on him. But hey, if you're stuck with him for a while, he can be useful for filling gaps in your lineup, at least. Finally, we have Hitona. And look, I get it, she's cheap to place and upgrade, but that's about all she has going for her. She's just not good in battle, even for a rare unit. It's like they made her a little too weak to be effective, but a little too expensive to be worth it. Use her for the early levels if you have no better options, but don't get your hopes up. There are way better rare units out there that will carry you much further in the game. So yeah, C-tier units are definitely the ones you want to replace as soon as you can, but if you're early in the game or lacking better units, they can be a decent stopgap. Just don't expect them to be your powerhouse picks as you progress. Keep grinding, and soon enough, you'll have those S-tier units carrying you to victory. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Boulder Lee, Leo, Marutu, Magma, Yasuke, Vigoto, Sensei, Emily, Heie, Nuzako, Inoke, Seijin PTS, and Pun. Let's talk about some of the B-tier units in Anime Reborn, shall we? These aren't the ones that are going to completely carry you through every mode, but they definitely have their uses, especially if you're early in the game or just need a little extra firepower. So grab your snacks, sit back, and let's dive into these units. First up, we've got Boulder Lee. Now, this guy is all about that AoE action. When fully upgraded, he can clear out a lot of enemies in no time, making him a solid pick for infinite modes. But let's be honest, getting him to his max upgrades can be a bit of a grind in shorter modes, so be prepared to work for it. Still, if you manage to get him there, he's pretty darn powerful. Next on the list is Leo. He's got that sweet burn DOT with his attacks, and he's alright when it comes to breaking shields. However, his SPA and DPS leave a lot to be desired. Compared to other legendaries, he's a little on the slower side, which makes him not the most efficient pick. Still, if you're in a pinch, he can get the job done. Just don't expect him to steal the spotlight. Then there's Marutu, a solid no-frills legendary ground unit. He's got decent DPS, AoE, and range, but he's pretty average overall. The real kicker is that he has no passives, so he doesn't really stand out among other units. If you're looking for something reliable but not necessarily top tier, Marutu's your guy. Otherwise, there are better options out there. Now, Magma is kind of like Leo's twin. His performance is almost identical, which means they're pretty interchangeable. Both have decent DPS, but nothing that'll make you go, wow, I can't believe I have this unit. Still, if you need a backup plan and you don't have any other better units, Magma can do the job. On to Yasuke, who's got some great DPS and range, but honestly, he still falls behind a lot of other legendary units in Anime Reborn. He's not bad, but compared to some of the heavy hitters, he can feel a bit underwhelming. If you're looking for someone to pack a punch, Yasuke might be a little too slow for your liking. Lastly, let's talk about Vigoto. He's got that cool passive that increases his range, which is nice, but it's not quite enough to make him a must-have. He's a solid unit if you don't have anything better, but overall, there are stronger options out there that can get the job done more efficiently. Keep him around if you're still working on building up your roster, but don't expect him to be your carry. And there you have it, folks. These B-tier units are decent, but they really shine when you don't have access to anything else. Make sure to weigh your options before committing to them, and remember, better units are always just around the corner. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Kuzar, Droid 18, Jonas, Orochimaru, Uryu, Gurdon, Zenith, Red Boss, and Neja. Alright, let's dive into some of the A-tier units in Anime Reborn. If you're looking for solid units to upgrade your squad, these legendaries and epics are going to be your best friends. So, grab some popcorn because it's time to break down some of the standout units that are sure to elevate your gameplay. First up, we've got Kuzar. This guy is an absolute beast when it comes to DPS and shield breaking. His low SPA and solid range make him perfect for dealing with tough enemies early on. If you're a newbie or just starting to build your team, Kuzar is going to be your go-to for a while. He's one of those units that just gets the job done, fast and efficient. Next is Droid 18. She's one of the cheapest legendary units, and while she doesn't have the slow passive like Uryu, her DPS is still pretty impressive for the cost. What makes her even better is that you can deploy her early and still make a solid impact on the battlefield. Sure, she doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but if you're looking for a low-cost DPS with some nice punch, Droid 18 is a solid pick. Then there's Jonas, a hybrid DPS and shield breaker with a little burn action thrown into the mix. While he's definitely solid, there are a few legendaries out there that might give him a run for his money. But if you want a unit that can handle multiple roles, DPS, shield breaking, and some additional DOT damage, Jonas is a great addition to your roster. Now, let's talk about Orochimaru. This guy's got burn damage in his kit, dealing 120% of his damage as additional burn over time. His AoE and decent SPA make him a solid pick, especially if you need to dish out consistent DOT damage. He's definitely one of the better burn units out there, and while he's not the absolute best, he's definitely worth using if you're looking for that extra burn edge. Moving on to Uryu. She's a heal unit with a 25% chance to slow enemies with her passive. While her stats aren't the greatest and her slow chance could be better, she's still useful if you're lacking a unit to target air. She doesn't shine as much as some of the other legendaries, but she'll get the job done when you need her. Lastly, we've got Gurdon, who applies poison DOT with his attacks. The poison lasts for up to 25 seconds, which makes him a solid unit for sustained damage. He's the best among the Black Clover legendaries, but as a DPS, he's still a bit underwhelming. However, his poison effect is a unique asset, so don't sleep on him entirely. So there you have it. These A-tier units bring a ton of value to the table, each with their own strengths and quirks. Whether you're just starting out or need some new firepower for your late-game strategies, these guys will definitely help you get the job done. Keep an eye on these units because they're about to make your team a whole lot stronger. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Hawkeyes, Itaha, Brolio, Tashrio, Noyele, Aokojo, Oda, Gramja, Super Gohu, Pain, Yungasi, Sun Prodigy Blazing, and Muichori. Let's dive into some of the absolute beasts in Anime Reborn, shall we? If you're looking to take your team to the next level, these units are going to make all the difference, especially when it comes to bosses and mobs alike. But don't worry, we've got a nice mix of offensive power and utility here, so no matter what you need, we've got you covered. Starting off with the king of boss killers, Hawkeyes. This guy doesn't just deal damage, he obliterates bosses with plus 100% damage, and when you evolve him, it's plus 150%. That's insane, right? But wait, there's more. His cone AoE attack is fantastic for clearing mobs, and with a low attacks per second, he's a solid pick for pretty much every situation. If you need a top-tier boss slayer, Hawkeyes should be your go-to. Next up is Itaha. If you're looking for someone who can handle mobs and still bring decent damage to bosses, Itaha's your guy. His burn ability combined with excellent DPS and range makes him an ideal choice for clearing waves of enemies. He's also a hybrid unit, meaning you get the best of both worlds. Great damage and versatility. If you don't have Hawkeyes yet, Itaha is definitely the next best option. Now let's talk about Broglio, another hybrid unit that's a monster when fully evolved. His full AoE coverage, solid DPS, and range make him an incredible pick for infinite modes. And his passive? Oh, it's just the cherry on top, as he boosts his damage with every attack. That's right, Broglio gets stronger the more he hits. You'll want him on your team if you're trying to farm efficiently or just rack up damage. Tashrio brings something a bit different to the table. His insane DPS potential skyrockets when paired with units that can freeze enemies, like Urain. He gets a 25% damage boost against frozen enemies and even deals additional damage over time. He's one of the few true hybrid units, blending offensive and support abilities. If you're into synergy and maximizing damage potential, Tashrio is a must-have. And let's not forget about Noelle, a hill unit that is a bit of an unsung hero. She's got great DPS for her cost, plus she offers plus 100% yen from kills, making her a perfect secondary farm unit. However, her line AoE attack as a hill unit can be a bit of a drawback, as it hinders her DPS potential. But if you're looking for solid value and a little extra cash flow, Noelle fits the bill. Last but definitely not least is Muichori. Now, Muichori isn't the flashiest mythic out there, but he's definitely reliable. When evolved, he gets a passive that boosts his damage against bosses and increases his damage even more every time he gets stunned, up to 35%. While he's not bringing any major buffs or CC to the table, his consistent damage can really add up, especially in longer fights. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Cod, Mercury, Dragon Emperor, Delta Brothers, Izon, King Rimura, Cydia, 21, Light, Picora Yellow, Asta, Greybeard, and Gohon. Alright, let's dive into some of the absolute powerhouse units in Anime Reborn that are shaking up the meta right now. These units aren't just strong, they're game changers. So if you're looking to dominate those waves, you've got to know who's who in this elite tier. First up, we've got Cod. This unit is an absolute beast. Once evolved, he becomes a hybrid, and when you upgrade him all the way, he gets the largest full AoE range in the game. I mean, we're talking massive coverage. On top of that, his DPS is off the charts, and his atomic ability, it's like dropping a nuke right in the middle of the battlefield. Doubling the range? Yeah, that's just unfair. Now, let's talk about Mercury. This guy is so meta right now, it's ridiculous. His passive ability ignores all those annoying enemy element damage debuffs, which means he performs solid no matter what you're up against. Plus, his line AoE attack dishes out some serious damage, and those summons? They scale with his damage, making him a real powerhouse as the waves go on. You want a reliable unit? This is your guy. If you're a fan of the full AoE style, then Dragon Emperor should be on your radar. This guy is a hybrid that dominates the field with some of the highest stats in the game, and when he evolves, he gets a support passive, which just makes him even better. Sure, getting him might feel like a grind, but trust me, it's totally worth it. Then we've got the Delta Brothers. These two are hands down the best shield breakers out of the secret units. They have a hybrid line attack and solid scaling for both damage and attacks per second. But the real kicker is their full AoE ability with a 300-second cooldown. That's perfect for clearing out mobs and dealing with all sorts of chaos. If you need to break through some tough defenses, the Delta Brothers are your go-to. Cydia is another full AoE unit you need to know about. She's got insane DPS potential and becomes a hybrid as she upgrades, but it's her passives that make her stand out. First, her attacks freeze enemies under 40% health. Then, on killing a frozen enemy, her SPA gets reduced by up to 30% for 15 seconds. Talk about crazy value. 21 is one of those units that can practically solo carry you in most modes. She starts with full, which is crazy in itself and has some seriously high stats. When maxed out, she does lose the AoE, but she gains even more range. Oh, and did I mention she's a heal unit? Yeah, she's pretty much a game changer, especially for infinite mode. Let's not forget about Light, who's also a hybrid unit, becoming even more versatile at his 6th upgrade. Once evolved, he gets full AoE and summons that buff other Light units in range. Plus, he gives those units a 20% damage boost. If you've got Light on your team, you're gonna see those numbers skyrocket. Lastly, Asta is a shield breaker that's currently topping the charts in Anime Reborn. His attacks break shields instantly, and he can't be CC'd by boss attacks. On top of that, when Yamo is within his range, Asta gets a 20% damage boost and a 5% SPA reduction, making him even more dangerous. The downside, he only targets ground, but with his strength, that's still a pretty solid trade-off. So, there you have it. These are just some of the top-tier units that are crushing it in Anime Reborn. Whether you need insane AoE, shield breaking, or boss DPS, this S+ tier lineup has everything you could ask for. Who's your favorite from this list? Let me know in the comments. Darkbeard, Nanami, Water Goddess, Ruki, and Killa. Alright, let's talk about some of the top support units in Anime Reborn. Now, if you're all about building that perfect squad to dominate the game, having solid support units can really make the difference. And trust me, these guys aren't just sitting in the backlines. They're bringing some serious firepower, even if they're not front and center in combat. First up, we have Darkbeard. This guy is a powerhouse, especially when he's maxed out. Darkbeard's specialty is full area of effect damage, which makes him perfect for dealing with mobs of enemies at once. But there's a catch, his upgrades are expensive. Like, you'll need a hefty amount of resources to get him to his full potential, but once you do, he becomes an absolute game changer. And the cherry on top, his attacks slow enemies, giving you more time to deal with them. It's like slowing down your problems before you finish them off. Next, let's talk about Nanami. Now, Nanami might not be the flashiest support, but he definitely has his moments. His special ability boosts the damage enemies take by 35%. So, if you're dealing with a tough boss or a particularly nasty wave, Nanami can give you that extra bit of damage per second that you need to turn the tide. He's a solid choice for those boss fights, but when it comes to regular waves, he's just not as exciting as the others. Still, that damage boost is a game changer when it counts. Now, if you're looking for a range buffing support with a bit of an edge, Water Goddess might be right up your alley. She can buff the range of your other units, making sure your attackers can hit targets from a safe distance. On top of that, she can deal respectable damage to regular mobs. Not the best for bosses, but she can certainly hold her own against swarms. Plus, she's got some shield breaking abilities, which is always useful when you're up against those tough shields that block most of your damage. She's like a backup dancer who can also rock the stage when needed. Then there's Ruki. Oh, Ruki. If you've got her on your team, you're pretty much in the Support Kings Club. She's a legendary unit for a reason. Ruki's passive ability freezes enemies, which is incredibly powerful in the right situations. Imagine freezing a horde of enemies just as they're about to swarm your team. Total game changer, right? On top of that, her DPS is solid, meaning she doesn't just slow enemies down, she also deals damage to them while they're frozen. If you want that top tier support, Ruki's your gal. Last, but definitely not least, we have Killa. He's got a stun ability and a pretty good attacks per second, making him a decent support unit. But honestly, when you compare him to Darkbeard and Ruki, he doesn't quite stack up. That being said, Killa can still target air enemies once fully upgraded, which is a massive plus if you're lacking other legendary units who can handle flying foes. He might not have the freeze or the AoE of some others, but his utility against air targets shouldn't be overlooked. So there you have it. Whether you need AoE damage, freezing powers, or just some extra DPS against bosses, Anime Reborn has a support unit for you. Each one has its strengths and weaknesses, so it's all about choosing the right one for your playstyle. Time King, Io from Heaven, Speedcart, Urain, Yano, Yamo Lucky One, and Bulba. Alright, let's get into some of the most meta support units in Anime Reborn. You know, the kind of characters that turn the tide of battle even when the odds are stacked against you. If you've been playing infinite modes, you've probably encountered a few of these powerhouses, but if you haven't, buckle up, because these units are game changers. Let's start with Time King. Now, this guy's got one major drawback. His placement cost is insane. Seriously, you'll be sweating trying to place him in short modes. But in Infinite, oh boy, he shines. His DPS is through the roof, his range is massive, and his 55% slow passive on all enemies in his range? That's pure chaos in the best way possible. And if that wasn't enough, Time King has an active that freezes all enemies for several seconds, giving your team the breathing room they need to clean up. Next up, we've got Io from Heaven. This hybrid unit is all about that high DPS, especially once evolved. Io has this neat scar debuff mechanic where he applies it to the first unit in range, dealing an extra 15% damage. But it doesn't stop there. He also packs a time stop ability, stunning all enemies in his range for a whopping 25 seconds. The catch? A huge 300-second global cooldown. But still, when you need to stop the clock and give your team an edge, Io is the one you want. Let's not forget Speedcart, the farm unit you absolutely need in Infinite. He's an expensive one, but hey, you need that cash flow, right? Not only does he help generate money, but his 15% upgrade cost reduction for the first 5 units placed in his range is a godsend. If you're not running Speedcart, you might as well start over because this guy makes progressing in long runs so much smoother. Now, we've got Urain, a solid DPS hill unit that comes with some serious crowd control. Every attack from Urain freezes enemies for 3 seconds, just enough time to give your team a massive advantage. On top of that, her AoE passive deals 35% of her damage to all enemies in her range every 45 seconds. If you've got a Tashrio or Aokojo on your team, Uraini is the perfect support to set up those devastating combos. Moving on to Yano. This unit is an absolute beast when it comes to slowing down enemies. Yano applies a permanent 50% slow on anything in his range, making him one of the best meta supports you can have. He's also a hybrid, so his multi-hit attacks and wind buffs make him a solid choice for any team running wind allies. If you want to control the flow of battle, Yano's your guy. And then there's Yamo. This guy's a blend of support and DPS, but his real power lies in his buffs. Yamo buffs Dark-type units with plus 35% damage, and also gives every unit within his range plus 15% crit rate and plus 15% crit DMG. When paired with Dark units like Asta, he's a devastating force. His DPS isn't too shabby either, so he can hold his own in battle while supporting the squad. That's it for some of the top support units in Anime Reborn. These guys might not be the flashiest on the roster, but trust me, they're the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes, ensuring your victory in those tough battles. If you're not already using these units, it's time to rethink your strategy. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.